I'm making sure my mic's on right. Every church has a different kind. As you may have noticed from this morning's music, the traditional scripture text for this last Sunday before the beginning of Lent is Jesus gathering his inside group of disciples, just a few, to go up on the mountain and learn to see him in a new way. They come down understanding that he's a close friend with Moses and Elijah, and not just the guy they've been walking with all these months. I chose the passage from Luke about the 70 disciples being sent out, thinking a bigger group might sound more like it includes us. And also because I'm preparing for a journey. I'm going on a pilgrimage. It's an ancient tradition common to many of the world's faith traditions, but a brand new thing for me. Almost. Actually, over the last 2 years, I've accidentally had a couple of pilgrimage experiences. I went to the Holy Land 2 years ago on a church tour with friends, thinking of it as an educational venture. And I was surprised by a sense of spiritual homecoming when I was in Jerusalem. And then summer before last, I did a 3-night solo hike on Mount Adams and came back surprised with a new perspective on my life. So this summer, I'm going on purpose to 2 traditional pilgrimage sites in Great Britain. A week at the Abbey on the Scottish island of Iona, and then a 100K walk on St. Cuthbert's Way, which ends on the holy island of Lindisfarne. That's in northeastern England. Before the Vikings ran them off in the 500s, Christian communities in those 2 places preserved learning, sent out missionaries to renew the church, created wondrous illuminated manuscripts, and hallowed their places with prayer. People call these 2 islands thin places, where human pilgrims can almost touch the divine. I went to a travel class on Scotland last week, and even the very secular travel guide who was teaching it said over and over again how magical Iona was. She felt the holiness and just didn't know what to call it. Besides those 2 experiences, I'm doing some vacation and ministry-related things, adding up to 5 weeks in all. I have never in my entire life been away from home for 5 weeks. Of course, the old pilgrims used to go away for years. In fact, one tradition of preparing for pilgrimage is to get your affairs in order and make your will. The journeys were perilous, and some people didn't make it back home alive. Another tradition is to travel light, carrying only what you need, and living simply on the road, no matter how grand your lifestyle back home might have been. Do you begin to see the kinship with the way Jesus sent out his folks? Another tradition is to go with a spiritual intention. It might be seeking forgiveness for something, or it might be an act of gratitude, like the pilgrims in Canterbury Tales who were giving thanks for having survived the plague. People commonly experience a reset of their old habits when they come home from a pilgrimage, or find a new sense of direction for their lives. Not a bad idea for the year I'm turning 60, and I'm excited. Because I'm inexperienced, planning for this adventure makes me feel a certain kinship with Bilbo Baggins, even though I thought the Hobbit movie was boring. Like Bilbo, I have a good and happy life, though my house isn't as nice as his and my neighborhood is not as peaceful as the Shire. I could coast to retirement. But a holy restlessness has crept into my life, amped up by those 2 accidental pilgrimages I mentioned. It's not as intense as rowdy dwarves barging in, turning my house upside down and eating all the food. It's more like Bilbo overhearing their song of yearning to go home from exile. More like Gandalf knowing that Bilbo needed an adventure, and knowing that he was up to it, more than he could ever know. He needed a cause larger than himself. Of course, I already have that as a disciple of Jesus, and so do you. But when was the last time that being a Christian felt like a grand adventure? You know, the Bible is filled with adventurous ancestors of the faith. Abraham and Sarah leaving home for a strange land with no map. Moses and the brave women who protected him. Warriors, leaders, and prophets. If you want a stirring summary sometime, go to the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews and read about the great cloud of witnesses who inspire us to lift our drooping hands and strengthen our weak knees and go. Jesus is ready to send us out on the road. Now, a guest preacher doesn't know the individual stories of her listeners, but I'll bet many of you have had turning points in your life where you set out on a road less traveled, where you made a leap of faith or took a big chance on love. And I know a church this old has certainly had those turning points where folks had to act, even though they couldn't be sure of the results. Bothell, the town, has changed a lot since 1885, hasn't it? And the church has changed in response. You moved in 1958. You added on in 1965. I looked on your website. And that's just the church building, right? The 50-year members we are honoring today have been around for much more. Controversial wars, changes in gender roles, the growth and increasing diversity of this area's population. Those things must have caused some ferment in the church. And yet you have grown, and you outgrew your sanctuary. Deciding to build this must have been a hard decision, and I saw all the hands of people who were here then. You weren't just doing it for yourselves to make your worship more beautiful. You were making room for more people. The financial commitment and risk must have been hard to swallow. You who were here then, am I right about that? A little scary? But you took courage and decided it was the faithful thing to do. You decided, you built it, and now you have paid for it. It's a great achievement that we dedicate to God this day. It's also a turning point, a new chapter in your life. We dedicate this sanctuary to God, but the church is not a building. It's the people, this body of Christ, yourselves, that you rededicate this day. I believe God has plans for you, and they have already begun. You have called it being Christ in the community. In the last few years, you've begun to look beyond yourselves in a new way. This builds on a long tradition of commitment to mission giving, to local service and charity. Yet there's a new flavor to it. More hands-on, more face-to-face, more mutuality with the people you serve. The gardens and the Bothell Community Kitchen have brought you into closer contact with your neighbors. And you're not just giving them something they need. You are listening to people as you sit at the table each week. You're building relationships. And as you come to know them, a connecting ministry is evolving according to what you learn. Some of the needs are material: food, help with housing or a job, immigration issues, referrals to some kind of services. Some needs are relational: loneliness and isolation, family troubles, child neglect or domestic violence. And some needs are going to be spiritual. As you get acquainted, you'll have natural chances to hear people talk about their faith and their spiritual yearning. And you will get to talk about yours. Some people will say yes to your invitation and join you for worship and service in the church. I believe God is going to fill this place up, but it won't be with people just like you. There will be folks with different needs, different tastes, different experiences. They'll have different ways of giving and receiving. They will have lives quite different from when you were their age. They won't become you. Like the 70 followers Jesus sent out to share the good news, you're being called to travel light as you go on the next stage of your journey. You've built a beautiful and satisfying church life together, but for the purposes of outreach into your mission field, you have to step back from it and get some perspective. What are the essentials for this pilgrimage? Let me slip back into my trip preparations for a moment. I've brought my sheet of Rick Steves' packing advice. It's titled, "Pack Light, Pack Light, Pack Light." And I quote, "You'll never meet a traveler who after 5 trips brags, 'Every year I pack heavier.' Rather than take a whole trip's supply of toiletries, take enough to get started and look forward to running out of toothpaste in Bulgaria. And think in terms of what you can do without, not what will be handy on your trip." This philosophy isn't just about avoiding a heavy bag. It's also about limiting the amount of American habits and preconceptions we bring. That other kind of baggage that sees people's differences as failed attempts at being us. Bulgarian toothpaste may taste quite different, and running out would force me to try it, right? So going out into the mission field of our own communities, how do we pack light? I would say we start by setting aside any sense of superiority or entitlement, and instead pack humility. We should leave self-serving agendas at home, like wanting to recruit more people so they can work in the church. A clear sense of our own social location and culture would be useful. We pack that. We should bring the essentials of our Christian faith, preparing to speak simply, without Methodist jargon, with a focus on Jesus' message of grace and love. Pack that. And a sense of adventure and curiosity can top it off. And then we're ready to step out with a willingness to meet people where they are, greeting them in peace, as Jesus instructed, listening to them, respecting what they have to offer us. Only sometimes will we have a chance to speak of our faith, but we always have a chance to embody Christ's love. Meeting new kinds of people and learning from them casts a different light on what we believe and how we do things, helping us to clarify what is central to our faith and why. We come to understand that some things we're used to are simply our preferences. As people come to join us, their gifts, desires, and priorities will reshape a part of church life. Just as you reshaped the church you inherited from generations past. And in a church this big, there's plenty of room to keep cherished traditions and also make a place for change. Things won't be just the same around the next bend in your road, but they will be interesting, rich, and full of God's life. When was the last time being a Christian felt like a grand adventure? It's easy for us to lose that edge when church life is beautifully suited to our own needs. We love our habits and the history we share. We love the songs we know and the friends we've made here. But the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few, my friends. God needs us out there. The road goes ever on, and it comes right to our door, crowded with people who need the love of God in their lives. We're called to go out as pilgrims on that road, traveling light, giving and receiving hospitality, sharing simply what we have been given. And may we come back home, back here, with our habits reset, with our focus more clear, with our minds and hearts open to God's leading. So hit the road, pilgrims, and may the next stage of your journey be blessed.